In 3, 2, 1, we are live. Hello, boys.
Hey.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I am Matt Kimball. I am joined by Will the Longhorn Townsend and Paul the Genius Smith Goodson. We are here for episode 41, fifth smallest prime number, episode of our data center podcast from Moor Insights Strategy, where we talk all things data center, sports sometimes, pop culture sometimes, but mostly data center. We have a bunch to talk about, but before we get going, we have to give you the disclaimer. Don't take anything we say as investment advice. I feel foolish saying this every week, but we kind of have to say it.
Well,
right?
And especially Matt, since Liberation Day, definitely don't take any of this as investment advice.
Just take it as three guys talking about fun stuff and nothing more and nothing less. We're going to talk about a whole bunch today. We're going to start with Palo Alto, talk about LLMs, talk about Intel, NTT, Darpa, and finally Broadcom, and specifically VMware for Broadcom. Lots of fun stuff to talk about. Hopefully it's going to be interactive and we can argue with each other and call each other idiots and all that. With that said, let's jump right in because the king of networking, Mr. Will Townsend, has something to say about Palo Alto networks and what he experienced in New York.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So, boy, I've been on the road for several weeks in a row, and I'm trying to remember when I was with Palo Alto Networks in New York. I think it was 2 weeks ago. But they do a road show called Ignite, and and a lot of companies, a lot of the companies that we spend time with, they do these big annual events, typically in Las Vegas, right? And Palo Alto Networks did that for a number of years, but then a few years ago, they made the decision to make it more of a regional roadshow. And so I think this is like the second or third year it's done it. And so they go around the country. So I was able to attend the event in New York City, and I had an opportunity to spend time with the leadership team as well. And it's sort of a user event. They invite customers, they bring partners. They have, as you would expect, sort of a mini trade show, kind of pavilion with the different integration partners and that sort of thing. And so I got to spend the whole day. And Nikesh is their CEO, and there were about a dozen analysts, including myself, that got some time with him. And I mean, hey, Palo Alto Networks, everyone knows who they are. They've been doing very well. Nikesh is a former Google executive. He's been CEO for 5 or 6 years now. And he's really accelerated the company to new heights. And it's been very focused on platform. And there's, it's sort of one of these debates, Matt, it because you cover security in some of your coverage areas as well. But the whole debate around, what's better, platform versus best of breed, right? And honestly, Nikesh and his team feel like platform is the best approach. I mean, certainly if you look at their stock performance, they've done very well with that.
Sure.
What I really like, though, about Palo Alto Networks is the fact that the way that they package their offerings, they're almost prescriptive in the way that they make sort of a set of recommendations for their customers, and they don't necessarily nickel and dime their customers with individual licenses for the functionality. And from my perspective, that's pretty innovative. Number one, it clearly executes against their platform strategy. They can sell adjacency when they bundle. But from my perspective, it has the potential to drive stickiness and loyalty because, when you approach it that way versus when RSA was doing security and they would bring in 9 different sales specialists to sell you all these different modules and features. It really, it creates a trusted advisory relationship from my perspective. And so So that really came through for me, speaking with Nikesh, speaking with his team, that they're very focused on delivering value and innovation. And they're doing that through the cloud. And they're enabling that, that value proposition. So, I really came away with, I had respect for the company, but came away with a different appreciation that the company is really focused on driving customer value. So I know that that's not very techy. I know typically we get really techy in our discussions here, but just wanted to share that. And I'll be spending more time with them over the course of this year. We've got some plans. There's some video work, in the pipe, as well as some formal writing where I'm going to go a little bit deeper on what they're doing. But what do you think about all that?
I think two things. First, I think if you can go going on the product side, if you can go, platform versus best of breed, I think open platform is the way to go, right? Yeah. So, and ideally, in the perfect world, right, I would deploy a platform, and frankly, if there's a best of breed solution, whether it's from that company that kind of plugs in, or from a third party, right? That would be ideal, right? But I think platform, I get what they're doing on the platform side. The security is so unwieldy, right? Yeah. You know this better than anybody,
the
right?
Tool sprawl, the tool sprawl and all that,
it only makes sense that you would try and kind of bring this all under one umbrella. I think and I agree with you on the pricing front and kind of how they approach their customers. I love what they're doing. I think when you don't focus on, nickel and diming your customers, and you really just focus on delivering value and focus on that as your kind of North Star, you're always going to win from a customer-centric perspective. And that is what drives, growth and brings more companies or makes more potential customers interested in you. When you get so focused on extracting every penny for the value you deliver, you lose sight of what's important, right? As a company. We'll talk about that later. But I think I love what they're doing. Paul, I didn't mean to step on you if you were going to jump in. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious. I know they integrate some cybersecurity components into different bundles.
Yeah.
What kind of bundles have they got?
I mean, it spans, everything from, cloud native application protection to endpoint. And also, I mean, they're integrating with other folks as well, right? And so it's not, and at the end of the day, it's not realistic to believe that an enterprise, regardless of their size, whether they're a mid-market or a large, multinational footprint, can standardize on one single, security platform.
Right.
But when you look at the average number of tools, the average mid-market is managing 50 to 75 point solutions. A large multinational, it could be in the hundreds. Being able to reduce that from 50 or 75 to 100 down to like a dozen, there's goodness in that. And Palo Alto Networks is integrating and working with other companies as well, because at the end of the day, one company is not going to provide, a one size, fits all. And they certainly recognize that. But yeah, I mean, they offer SASE, they offer a 5G enabled SASE endpoint, cloud protection. So really, when you look at the depth and breadth of what they're doing, and when you look on top of that, the integrations that they're doing with others on identity and that sort of thing, there's a lot of value in reducing that complexity, Matt, that you were speaking to. And at the end of the day, delivering value, because there are a lot of companies out there that are kind of moving in that direction with platform. But when you look at the underlying pricing, again, it still gets pretty difficult to manage. And at the end of the day, focusing on the customer and focusing on driving value and focusing on reducing complexity is the right thing. And that's the reason why the company is continuing to do so well. Not to say there might not be a bump in the road, down the path there, but yeah, at a high level, I like what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's a great story.
Yeah,
love to see companies like that. Love to see them succeed too.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to going from kind of really cool security to the dirty little secrets of LLMs. This sounds juicy. What do you got for us, Paul? This is clearly your headline.
Anthropic AI has done some kind of really neat research and stuff. They were formed in 21 by a bunch of companies, by some former OpenAI employees, and they got investments from Amazon and Google and different companies. But their family is called Claude AI.
Mm-hmm.
They've got different models, and they recently published a couple of what I consider breakthrough research papers that lets us look inside of a model and see how it works. One of the AI models are basically a black box. We don't know really how they work, internally. We know how they're built and that type of thing, but how they actually do things, we don't really understand it. And Anthropic has done some research on that. They program, they're programmed differently than traditional computers. I mean, they're trained with massive data sets and that type of thing. And so we've basically got a black box, but they built up kind of a way to trace pathways within the model and see how different things are working. They put what they call the attribution graphs, and that's what they use to trace it through. But a couple of things that they found out was what kind of surprised me, and I think it surprised them too, is that in multi-step reasoning, I don't know if you guys have used a model and you can actually watch and see how the reasoning is done.
No.
Chain of thought, how each one operates and everything. But they were able to see how this multi-step reasoning worked and how it went from basically the input to the output. And it kind of raised some issues in terms of there may be some flawed logic in there. It actually does. They figured out it actually does kind of reasoning in its head without really explaining what it's done. So when you're looking at some of the chain of thought, it doesn't really output everything that went on inside the model's head. So that's kind of a bad thing, because you don't want these models to obscure what they're doing. I mean, it could end up in dangerous behavior. It could be they could be trying to intentionally obscure information. Those are kind of dangerous signals that we look for.
Yeah.
They also found out when they're doing when it's doing text generation, like poetry, it'll actually create structural elements to get a list of rhyming words, and then they take those rhyming words, and as it's writing a poem, it'll actually select words out of that rhyming list. So it plans ahead. They gave the example of it picked rabbit is a word that they wanted to rhyme with, and it made a list of different things, and it came up with words like grab it and that type of thing, and that's kind of a red flag to me also, because it could be they could use that advanced planning capability to kind of create and deliver deceptive content to a user.
Right.
I'm not saying it's a dangerous model, because they're very careful with it. And it was able to do one thing that surprised the researchers. It was able to do they presented some symptoms of disease or something, and it was able to come up with a diagnosis of what the disease was. And then it created a list of questions that should be used to question the patient on to confirm if this diagnosis was correct. So that's it's pretty advanced thinking for a model. And I think they published a paper. This was one of the studies, was kind of a follow-up on that, but the paper was called "Reasoning Models Don't Always Say What They Think," and that kind of really sums up some of the stuff that they found out. It could end up being intentional deception and providing misleading information, and those are things that that we worry about. Google published a paper on from DeepMind a couple of years ago that listed all the different issues and everything that we need to watch out for that could be danger signals, and a couple of these were in that list.
So Paul, with that said, when you think about Claude, Llama, kind of the different models out there, is it fair to say that this kind of masking of the logic that's used for reasoning, whether it's inductive, deductive, whatever, it's all kind of masked, or do you think it varies from model to model?
We just don't know how they work.
Yeah, because they don't. Yeah, okay. Do you think this will cause other model providers to publish papers on kind of inner workings?
Well, yeah, we actually, we only know a little bit, a small percentage of what goes on inside the model, and we need. I mean, it took several hours to trace one of these pathways through the model to find out what it's actually doing.
Yeah.
So, we don't have near enough information on, completely what's going on. The models use these large neural networks internally, and they've got this huge computational processes that they use. They got billions of parameters, connections, and computational pathways, and it's difficult to try and trace this stuff all the way through that maze.
Sure, but it's necessary in the long run.
I mean, there's been more and more pressure, as the models have got more sophisticated and they've been deployed in wider applications like healthcare and financial and defense. There's been more pressure to really understand how these things work, and so this is one of the products of that.
Hey, Paul, I read an article recently about the weaponization of large language models. Yeah. So is what you're mentioning? I mean, could potentially because I'm a security guy, right? So I'm always thinking about this. I mean, is there also a concern around, I guess so. The notion of sort of masking all of this, is that to prevent the weaponization of an LLM by a bad actor as well?
Well, I mean, that's the one thing that we've got guardrails for, is that it doesn't do something like that. But that's obviously something that the military and Defense Department are working on. So they did do some studies on a couple of years ago or a year ago about how models would react to different threat situations, and one of the outcomes was that it wanted to nuke whatever was going on. So
yeah, kind of like War Games, like that movie War Games, where it launches World War III basically, right, when it senses it's being attacked or something.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. All right, so that was really encouraging. Let's
Yeah, no, I'm completely depressed now. That should bode really well for the stock price of any AI infrastructure company, right?
There's nothing wrong with this model. I mean, it's just kind of the first time we really got a peek inside of it and what it was doing, and learned some new things. So
no, it's really interesting, because to what you're saying, it's not that Claude's a very good model. There are a lot of good models out there, but understanding more deeply kind of how these models, how they do reason, and what the different paths of reasoning look like.
Yeah,
it is interesting, because it speaks to how more accurate you can get them over time.
right.
For certain. Anyway, all right. Let's move on. We are going to talk about optimism here. So Intel Vision. So
bring the happy, Matt. Bring the happy, man.
I have some happy for you. So went to Intel Vision last week, and I'm going to admit that I was suffering. I make it sound like I'm some warrior. I had a nasty sinus infection that I picked up in New York or Boston before that and carried with me. But with that, I was half tuned in, and I caught a couple of really interesting things coming out of three interesting things I'm going to say coming out of Vision. First, it's a new company, without a doubt. I loved Pat Gelsinger. As a person, I thought he brought a very strong kind of moral bend, if you will, to Intel.
Yeah.
And I thought that was critical because I think it helped change the culture a little bit. From kind of what they were to being maybe a little bit more humble, if you will. But and he implemented some things that we're seeing kind of really start to take hold and kind of affect change. But so you have that, right? He comes and he goes, and then this new CEO comes in, Lip Bhutan, who was on the board and had left the board a few months back, but he comes in as the new CEO, and he says, you know what? New CEO, new Intel, we're going to get streamlined, we're going to get focused, we're going to deliver value, we're going to think about where we can grow, where we can add value, and where we can't add value, we're going to shed it. Where we can add value, we're going to double down on it. And so, his theme was, I'm going to focus on balancing the books. And while I'm doing that, I've got this amazing team that's going to do some great stuff. And two things in particular that fell out of that was I was like completely floored by, I guess not totally, was that Intel is doubling down on custom silicon. So I'm going to take a couple minutes on this to kind of, for the listeners, you guys know this because you've heard it, but for the listeners. So, Intel has been doing semi-custom, if you will, silicon for some time for cloud providers, right? AWS comes and says, hey, we need this core count at this frequency, because we have to fit within this power performance threshold to service our customers and really kind of get the best return on our investment. So Intel goes back and they fuse off a few cores and they reduce the frequency or crank the frequency, turn the knobs a little bit. And that's an off-brand part for AWS. Azure does it, GCP does it, everybody does it, all the cloud providers do it, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that was the extent, and AMD does it too, by the way.
Yeah.
That was the extent of the customization they would do. So along comes ARM with Neoverse and says, hey, we can do more than that. Not only can you turn off a couple cores and increase the frequency, you can design anything you want around these cores for the optimal compute platform. And that's where you saw Graviton take hold from AWS. You saw Azure launch Cobalt. Ampere came onto the scene with the merchant piece of ARM, and GCP as well did Axion. And it has been proven to be very popular. Oh, by the way, in addition to that, for those companies that either don't want to or can't afford to hire an entire silicon design team, companies like Broadcom and Marvell do custom silicon, right? They do CPUs, XPUs, they do networking pieces, they do all kinds of, right? Yep. And it's all based on ARM. And it has been incredibly successful. You wake up one day and ARM is claiming that they're going to be 50% of the cloud data center by the end of 2025. Pretty incredible, right? So Intel looks at that and says, wait a minute, what's keeping us from doing something like that, right? Why can't we do more deeper levels of custom silicon? So at Vision, they announced that they're jumping into, I shouldn't say jumping into, they're increasing their support for custom silicon to be more like ARM and its CSS program through the Neoverse architecture with x86. So they're going to open it up and allow an Amazon, allow an Azure, or allow those next wave cloud providers, the Lambda Labs, the CoreWeaves, those the vultures, those up and coming cloud providers, to either develop or contract back to Intel to do custom silicon for their specific environments, which I think is absolutely game changing, because it's not just about a whole bunch of cores and frequency. It's about, can I add an accelerator? Can I remove an accelerator? Xeon's got a bunch of accelerators on there. If I took off, 3 of the 6, does that give me more, performance, or I shouldn't say performance, but more power efficiency? There are all kinds of things they can be doing that I think is going to become very interesting I think it's going to be disruptive for the cloud game.
Mm-hmm.
That was part 1. Part 2, they announced that 18A, their new process node, is in what they call risk production. And you hear that and you're like, holy crap, that doesn't sound good, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a really good sign. So what happens is when I'm working and when I'm working on a new process node, there's a lot I have to do to verify that it's working well before I go into volume production. Because if one thing is wrong, it can cost me millions to millions to tens of millions of dollars in losses, right? And it ruins my reputation with my customers. Risk production means I've taken my process node, parts that are built on that process node, I've shipped them out to select customers. It's like a beta test. They've run well. We've uncovered all the bugs. We fixed them all. And we are at a place where we think this is good. We're going to make a couple of final tweaks and go into volume production. So it means that their 18A is going to hit volume production in the next couple of months. And they're going to have a process node advantage, something they haven't had for a very long time, over the competition. Competition being TSMC at a manufacturing process, who will be on a 2 nanometer node, and competition and advantage over AMD, who has been leveraging TSMC and has had that process node advantage for some time. Mm-hmm. They've also made a couple of changes in the way they're bringing power to their transistors and the transistors they're using to cut down on the amount of power leakage and potential signal degradation that happens, which should make this, again, add a little bit more to the power efficiency, but certainly add to the performance as well. So really good things coming out of Intel, stuff that an enterprise IT person might not even think about, but it has a huge impact on performance, price performance, power performance, all of the metrics you use within your data center to say this CPU is good or not good. It contributes heavily to those metrics. I'll stop.
Intel needs a win. I mean, it's been a rough road for them, right? Not only from kind of a couple of waves of reduction in force and a new leader now, and so it's encouraging to see that, Matt. Any sort of update on Foundry and where that's going at Vision?
Yeah, I mean, all indications that I heard from Vision were Foundry there's no split that's taking place. They're going to continue to invest. They see the value they have in Foundry. Quite frankly, I think if you stripped Foundry from Intel, you lose a lot of what makes Intel so unique and such a strong alternative, or such a strong player in the market in the first place. Controlling your manufacturing process, there are pluses and minuses to it. It has been Intel's strength. It's been an albatross for the last couple of years, but it's been traditionally has been a strength of theirs that I don't think going fabless. I don't think going fabless does a lot for Intel like it did for AMD and it does for ARM, quite frankly.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
And I would say, a lot of this doesn't happen. Gelsinger was super aggressive with his 5 nodes in 4 years to kind of bring them back to process node competitiveness. I don't think we would be where we are if Gelsinger did not set that vision for the company. And it's funny because there's been a lot of beating up of Intel over the last couple of years. If you look at the underlying moves they've made, Xeon 3, Xeon, say 4th gen Xeon, you started to see kind of changes to what they were doing. by adding acceleration. 5th gen, you started to see changes. In 6th gen, they're kind of at parity, there was a lot going on underneath that was easily ignored because people get caught up in looking at how many cores do you have, how many cores do they have, and you get focused on the stuff that is interesting, but maybe not as important to the kind of the foundational architecture. Intel's done a lot of good stuff that you're going to start to see come to light. You see it in Xeon 6. You're really going to see it in Xeon 7 and moving forward. So,
good stuff.
Fun time.
Yeah.
All right. I could go on forever, but I'll stop talking. Paul, did you want to add something before we move on to?
No, I agree. ARM's flexible licensing and custom chip services really put the pressure on Intel and AMD, and it's good that Intel is able to respond strategically to it. So.
I suspect we're going to see something happen from AMD as well. I can't imagine that they sit idly by.
Right. Yeah.
And we've talked about this on this podcast a number of times. If you go back, and I called it out, it's like, at some point, all of that revenue that ARM is taking at, maybe it's the lower margin parts, but all of that revenue they're taking, it has an impact on what companies like Intel and AMD can do. Because 50% share, right? That's a heck of a lot of money that you were collecting before that you're not collecting now. That you were able to invest back into your business that you can't invest back into your business now. So, I think it's a smart move, and it's going to be fun to watch it play out. But anyway, all right, let's move on to Will, who is talking about NTT. And NTT Upgrade Preview. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem, Matt. So, so I'm going to be spending time with NTT later this week in San Francisco. I'm going to be in San Francisco twice this month. It's kind of crazy because I'm going to be back for RSA conference at the end of April. But this is NTT Upgrade. This is their signature North America event. It's sponsored by NTT Research, which is one of the many different, sister companies under the NTT holding company. NTT Research is engaged in exactly what you would think, applied research across a number of different domains and areas. A lot of focus on healthcare, a lot of focus on manufacturing. So I'll be providing my insights while I'm there, probably over X and LinkedIn and that sort of thing. I'll probably also write a research note or an analyst insight on the Moor Insights Strategy website summarizing it. But at a high level, I'm really looking forward to spending more time with the team there to understand what they're doing around their all photonics network, which is called IOWN, IOWN. And on our podcast here, I think I've shared a link with a recent video that I did with an executive there. But Matt, this is really innovative. So NTT, and by the way, through what's called the Global Forum, the NTT Global Forum, they brought over 150 other companies, including Dell Technologies and others, that are helping to invest in an ecosystem to drive this notion. But at a very high level, it's a multi-staged sort of journey it's gonna take a few decades to get there. But the whole notion is bringing photonics into every layer of the architecture stack. Yep. And so basically, if you think about that, bringing photonics into eventually end devices. Yeah. And if you think about the ability to drive more sustainable infrastructure, drive much faster throughput, much lower latency. Yep. We're already experiencing modern AI and the demands that are being placed on workloads. But think out 10 or 20 years from now, what we'll be contending with, right? So it's a very ambitious initiative. It's in stage, I think it's entering 2.0 of like a four cycle, like I said, multi-decade effort. Again, the 6.5 media video that I recorded with NTT can educate our viewers and listeners on more details. But again, very ambitious. I love ambition and technology, so I'm really looking forward on the 9th and the 10th to be spending more time with them. And so I just wanted to use the Data Center podcast this week as a gratuitous plug for all of my involvement there. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know, Matt or Paul, if you had a chance to check out that 6.5 video that I recently recorded. But what do you think of this whole notion of bringing photonics into the entire stack? It's kind of crazy, right?
Kind of.
Kind of.
Affects everything. Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Paul?
No, I just said it affects everything, what they're doing. I mean, everything from automotive to medical imaging and healthcare. I mean, everything. So.
And and healthcare is a big focus for them. They're doing biodigital, like cardiovascular twins. I mean, this isn't just manufacturing, guys. I mean, and this is pretty amazing if you think about applying like a digital twin to cardiovascular, and what the next miracle discovery could be birthed out of this. I mean, there's no guarantee, right? But yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about.
When I think about lasers doing chip to chip communication, and it's like, man, that's crazy.
It is crazy stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, your latency effectively goes away. You're traveling, you're traveling
at
the speed
ultra low latency.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how you manage the power, and if you start to get into materials kind of science at that point,
right?
It is fascinating. I wish I was smarter so I could better appreciate this. No, I mean, that's necessarily because it's so far ahead of where we are. I mean, even like we're going to talk about quantum next, right? And quantum is science fiction, but this is science fiction on steroids.
Yeah. It really is. And I didn't, when and it's been, it took about a year for me to get to know the team. And then I've had an opportunity to travel to Tokyo for the last 2 years for NTT's R&D forum. And this will be my second or third upgrade. I didn't, when I started this journey with NTT, I thought of them as like an integrator. Like they work with Cisco, they do integration, they do private cellular. But then as I started attending this R&D forum in Tokyo, and I'm hoping to go again for a third year in November this year, and I started getting my head wrapped around it. It really kind of blew me away. And you talk about the companies out there that invest, tremendously in R&D, certainly NVIDIA, you think of, Huawei, they, if you believe what they report, the billions of won or whatever that are invested there, but NTT is right up there, and they're this company that, is based in Japan, started out as Nippon, Telephone and Telegraph. And as you walk through the streets, as you walk through the streets of Tokyo and you look down at manhole covers, you see NTT.
Yep.
And but it's just it's anyway. I mean, I don't want to wax on about how awesome they are, but they're one of the best kept secrets, I think, around. And I'm trying to change that as an analyst as I spend more time with them and write more about them. But anyway, I'm super excited about being in San Francisco with them on the 9th and 10th, and there'll be more to come.
Yeah, they remind me of kind of the Bell Labs back in the day, which, and even like the Xeroxes, right? I mean, there's so much innovation that comes out of these companies that you just don't know about, but they have staying power. It's incredible what they're doing. All right, sorry. All right, Mr. Smith Goodson, let's move on and talk about quantum computing and benchmarking. The first quantum benchmarking ever is this?
No, it's not the first, but it's a big one. DARPA is sponsoring something called a Quantum Benchmarking Initiative, QBI, and the goal is that they've got a current program right now that I think there's like three companies that are still involved in it, but they were looking for advanced technology that's going to actually provide like real quantum services. This is a benchmarking initiative that the goal is to, obviously build fault tolerant quantum computers by, I think it's 2033. They're going to launch this program, actually kick it off in July. Or they kicked it off in July. And it's set up to verify and validate, actual quantum computers and their approaches, and make sure that their value, the value exceeds the cost of it by 2033. So that's kind of where they're going with it. It's got different structures. Stage A is like a technical evaluation, and that's going to last like 6 months. So you can tell it's going to be pretty detailed. The next stage is like an R&D evaluation, and that's going to go for an entire year. And the stage C is an independent verification and validation. It's going to be an evaluation of the hardware and the subsystems and algorithms. And the companies that are participating are, name a few here. I've got them written down here. Just name a few. Atom Computing in Boulder, Colorado. HP Enterprise in Houston. They've got superconducting qubits. IBM, of course, with their superconducting. IonQ with the trapped ion. Photonic is optically linked silicon spin qubits. Quantinium in Colorado has got trapped ion. And SQC, which is silicon quantum computing, that's in Sydney, Australia. And then Xanadu is another photonic. So they're getting serious about it. Especially with these extended time periods, like 6 months in a year to do some evaluation. It's not a competition. It's really a real assessment to identify a path to fault-tolerant quantum computing. So,
I'm guessing
go ahead.
I'm guessing that when DARPA, when we hit kind of the end of this, the output is DARPA is effectively saying, to the government, these are the systems you can trust, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, because it subtly forces, if these companies want to make money off their investments, it forces them to kind of go through that stringent kind of review, right? Which is a good thing.
Yeah, this is going until 2033, but for instance, companies are making really good progress. IBM on the roadmap, if you look at that, they're expected to have a fault-tolerant quantum computer by 2029. That's only 4 years away.
Yeah.
And like Jensen predicted that they wouldn't be useful for another 15 to 20 years, which is absolutely ridiculous. And he admitted that he made a mistake by saying that. But 4 years away from fault tolerance is not bad.
No, that allows you to start kind of that allows you to get along the path to mainstream adoption, or to move it out of concept into real production.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think, when you look at, and it's like there's so much that falls out of DARPA, right? I mean, I shouldn't say that is born out of DARPA. Do you see this as kind of a major milestone to kind of commercialization, if you will?
I see it more of a validation. I think they're a little bit behind, in my opinion. Quantinium is going to be there with fault tolerance in 4 or 5 years. IBM is going to be there. I suspect a couple of others are going to be there in 5 or 6 years. So
yeah,
I think maybe they're a little bit behind the time.
Okay. All right. So, all critical of DARPA. There we go. I love it. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Last topic. Broadcom VMware revenue soar. What the heck does all of this mean?
Yeah.
So let me give you the setup. In case you didn't know, Broadcom acquired VMware some time ago. Yeah, I know. Not a lot of people know that, Will. So crazy numbers. They reported back, I guess about a month ago, their numbers. Crazy numbers came out of Broadcom. So in their Q1 25, I'm looking down a little bit because I had to take notes. There's so many numbers here. The silicon business grew at 11% clip, which is healthy, fueled by XPU business. Went from 7.4 billion to 8.2 billion year over year. Their software business, which is mainframe and VMware, right? So mainframe software they do and VMware software they do, grew from 4.1 billion in Q1 24 to 6.7 billion in Q1 25, a 47% growth, year over year growth, and fueled by VMware and VCF licensing. Absolutely nuts. If you kind of step back a little bit and you look at kind of how this played, and you look at before VMware was even accounted for, you would realize that the traditional Broadcom software business had been growing at about a 3% clip year over year through 2023. And now all of a sudden it's growing at 45%. So it's safe to say that VMware is a major contributor to this.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that they talk about, right? So Hock Tan, when he was on there doing the earnings announcement, talked about the renewals for VCF 9 in particular. He talked about locking in approximately 70% of their top 10,000 customers into their new licensing mode. And when you look at it, it's like you feel like obvious win for Broadcom, right? So here's what's interesting when you pull back, and it is, I mean, short term, they certainly have monetized the heck out of this. Anecdotally, there's not a single IT person I speak to that does not say, and this is at companies large, small, and in between. There's not an IT person that I speak with that does not say we are actively exploring alternatives.
Yeah.
What I suspect is going on is you see a little bit of a sunk cost for companies kind of renewing on VMware, because you can't just rip and replace. It's so entangled and so kind of embedded in every fabric of the company, from compute to storage to networking to security to cloud. So you can't just rip and replace kind of VMware and move on to Nutanix or something else. But I think people are putting a sunk cost into that VMware license while they look at migration strategies and then go execute them. That's what I strongly believe. And it is clear that the company is truly focused on, large enterprise, very large enterprise. They say their top 20,000 customers. I think it's probably more like their top 10,000 customers. They recently changed their licensing model. It used to be able to license for down to 16 cores. Now a minimum is 72 cores. So those companies that were running VMware on, a couple of servers that was 32 cores, now they have to effectively, or 36 cores, now they have to effectively double their licensing costs. A lot of things they're doing that's telling the mid-market and smaller customers
to go away.
Yeah, we're really not interested in you. We really want the large ones. Yeah. But I think they're missing out on the fact that large customers equally are unhappy, and we've seen AT&T suing them.
Yeah,
see Nutanix really kind of making a lot of headway in going after not just the smaller customers, but establishing partnerships with Dell and HPE to go after the large accounts as well. I think what's going to happen over the next few years, you've got three paths effectively. You can go from VMware to next, right? You can go from VMware to VMware Private Cloud, which is VCF. I don't know a lot of folks that just want to do private cloud, but you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Go from VMware to hybrid cloud, which is Nutanix. Or you can go from VMware to kind of a mix of kind of, HCI-like with hybrid cloud and cloud native built in there as well, which is Nutanix or Red Hat. And then you can go from VMware to kind of pure cloud native, which is it's longer term, but I think it's where the market's going, which is also Nutanix or Red Hat. I think over the next few years, you're going to see that top 10,000 customers maybe going to be a top 5,000, and you're going to see more and more customers move over to these alternative platforms as Broadcom tries to further monetize that investment they've made in VMware. I like a lot of what Hock Tan does and what he's saying about, and I get his ideas around kind of private cloud and why it's critical. And for some customers, he's spot on. I struggle a little bit with this being a broad market play, though.
Yeah.
Because from a broad market play, it's a hybrid cloud world.
For sure.
Heavily regulated, heavily, kind of focused on data secrecy, not just privacy, but secrecy. That private cloud story doesn't always work. So I'm going to be kind of curious to see how this plays.
Yeah.
I'll stop there, let you guys weigh in, and we can.
I agree with you, Matt. I mean, solid insights there. And, another gratuitous plug, I wrote an article last year about observability tools and how they can aid VMware migrations. But same for me, when I have an opportunity to talk to customers, there isn't one that's not actively looking for another alternative, right? And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, clearly VMware is focused on very, very large enterprise, and their licensing strategy is speaking volumes towards that. Mm-hmm. So, and hey, I know you spend a lot of time with Nutanix, and that presents a tremendous opportunity for Nutanix, right, to step in there and service that mid market. So, and there's a ton of volume there, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to move from mid market up to large enterprise too. And I say 5,000, maybe it's less than that, but I think Nutanix and Red Hat are going to come in. Yeah. And they're going to eat into that customer base. It's going to start in the mid, and Nutanix is going to dominate in the mid, and it's going to creep up into commercial enterprise, and then it's going to creep up into large enterprise. And that commercial and large enterprise, you're going to see Nutanix and Red Hat both be very successful in poaching customers away. Mm-hmm. And all we're waiting for is a maturity of the tool chain that helps migration. And my gosh, with AI assistance, it is going to be easier and easier over the next couple of years as Nutanix and Red Hat build the tools that help you migrate away from.
Do you also think, Matt, with IBM's acquisition of Hashi, does that accelerate Red Hat's footprint as well?
Yeah, I think it does. It does, yes. I think some of what IBM has within, or even just Red Hat has within their tool chest already helps. Hashi absolutely helps kind of deepen the capabilities through provisioning kind of and deploying, certainly from a provisioning perspective. But I think a lot of the core tools are already inside of Red Hat and OpenShift. It's just a matter of, AWS, and I'll shut up after this, but AWS demonstrated at reInvent last December a tool. I think they called it a VMware modernization tool. And really what it was an AI assistant that went in and scanned your environment and showed you how to migrate away from VMware onto AWS.
Oh, wow.
And even if that's only 80% of the way there, that saves years in migration, right?
For sure.
Take a company like a Red Hat or Nutanix, and that's all they're focused on. They can bring that accuracy way up, and they can make those tools far more effective, I think, than even an AWS can. Yeah. Because it's not just going to be just in AWS as a landing spot, right? There's still an on-prem component to it. Yeah. And I think once you start to see those tools mature a little bit, game is on. But anyway.
Yeah, I didn't hear you mention, I don't know, one smart thing they did is it cost about $2.5 billion to run VMware, and they reduced that down to a little over $1 billion. So the profit margins have gone up, and as long as they don't rip out anything really important, that was smart. But,
Oh yeah, yeah. Look, you cannot argue with the brilliance of Broadcom and kind of what they've done with
Yeah.
VMware.
yeah.
Even when you look at VMware's last reporting cycle independently to where it is now, I think Broadcom has added $1 billion worth of additional revenue into VMware, and it's at a 78% operating margin. So, that's up 17%, I think, from what you saw previously. So
yeah, that margin is nuts, Matt. Isn't it?
Yeah, you can't argue. Catch them while you can.
Pushing 80 points, man. Like, I'll take that any day, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hey, we were going to do a getting to know the team, but we ran a little bit long. I apologize. I think it's probably better to just kind of let's go on to where we're headed to in the next few weeks, and do a getting to know the team next. So, we're starting to hit the height of conference season again. What do you guys got going on? You want to start with you, Will?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, NTT RSA conference. I get into May, and then I'm spending time with Fastly, a CDN provider. Extreme Network. So I'll be in Paris with Ben Culp and that team. He's joined to sort of revitalize their analyst relations program. So I'm looking forward to spending time with Ben and the Extreme Networks team. And then, man, get into June. Hey, you and I, we've got Discover. I've got Zscaler Zenith Live. I've got Cisco Live. So I don't get a breath until July, until 4th of July. So so I'm on the road a lot.
What do you got going on, Paul?
Yeah, I'm trying to cut down on travel because of some family situations, but I do have an article coming out on the topic we talked about, and I've got another one that I'm working on for IBM. It's got some really, really interesting things in it. So,
awesome.
And if I can get my income tax done, I'll be a happy man.
I got mine done this weekend. Woo!
I got April's a little quieter for me. I have a couple of analyst summits I'll be attending, but the heat starts up again in May. We've got Nutanix, we've got AMD, we've got Pure Storage, we've got HPE Discover, Dell Tech World, Microsoft Build. I think May and June I'm on the road every week.
IBM Think in May. I'm sorry, I forgot about Think. I'll be there for the first time. I'm super excited about that. So.
Yeah, and then NetApp and Broadcom as well. So it's going to be a busy few weeks. It's going to be fun for us to touch points and catch up based on what we're hearing and what we're seeing out there.
For sure.
Anyway, hey guys, thank you for taking the time, and thanks for the extended conversation. It's been a while since we've all been together and been able to just kind of unload. For those that are listening at home or in the office, thank you for joining us. And thank you for if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us and look in the show notes for additional info. If you liked us, even if you didn't like us, please like and subscribe. If you didn't like us, blame it on Paul. We always blame Will. Let's blame it on Paul this time. Closing reminder, don't take anything we say as investment advice, especially today or tomorrow or the next couple of months. But certainly do reach out if you want to have some deeper insights on some of the topics we talked about. And we will see you in a couple of weeks, boys.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys.
Good convo.
Yeah, talk soon.